I don't often revisit this part of my life. It still has a weight to it, you know? My name's Verity. And for years, I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I was loyal enough, I'd always have a place. But when the end came, it wasn't a storm. It was a whisper. A slow, quiet vanishing act, orchestrated by the people I trusted most. If you've ever been made to feel invisible, maybe this story will resonate. Because sometimes, disappearing is the first step to finding your own way back. They didn't even say my name. That's what hit me first, a cold little shock. The voicemail, it was my mother, Eleanor, her voice so brittle, so rehearsed. Like she was reading from a prepared statement at some sterile press conference, not talking to her own daughter. Hello, it started, not hi Verity, just a flat, impersonal hello. We've made a decision regarding the restructuring of Rhodes Manufacturing. Effective immediately, your role with the company has been eliminated. Our attorney will be in contact. Then just the click, the abrupt silence of a severed line. Nothing more. Not a thank you for 17 years of your life. Not even a simple Verity. My name, the one that had been on countless late-night emails, on every single financial report that kept the wolves from the door, on the loan documents that literally kept the company afloat during more than one crisis, suddenly, it just wasn't there. Erased. I replayed the message 3 times, leaning closer to my phone speaker each time, as if volume would somehow reveal a hidden layer of meaning, of warmth, just to make absolutely sure I hadn't somehow missed something. A second message tucked behind the first, maybe? A hesitant apology, a flicker of the mother I thought I knew? There was nothing. Just those cold, corporate words. My name is Verity Rhodes. I was 38 years old then. I'd been an integral part of Rhodes Manufacturing since I was barely 21, fresh out of college and eager to prove myself. 17 years. 17 grinding, relentless year-end closes. 17 holiday seasons where vacation meant being tethered to my laptop, checking emails from a rented cabin or a relative's noisy living room, if I was lucky enough to get away at all. The company bore my grandfather's name, Thomas Rhodes, sure, but I was the one down in the engine room, patching the holes, bailing water, and keeping the rusty old ship from sinking whenever it started taking on water. And just like that, I was out. Not with a face-to-face conversation, not with a formal meeting, not even a direct email to me. Just a cold, anonymous voicemail delivered like a drive-by shooting of my career. I was in my little apartment in Portland, the one with the slightly fogged view of the Hawthorne Bridge on misty mornings like that one. My morning tea, usually a small ritual of peace, was still steaming on the windowsill, completely forgotten. The rain was doing that steady, insistent Oregon drizzle against the glass, a sound I usually found comforting, like a soft blanket. But that day, it just felt like the world itself was weeping, a monotonous, gray, indifferent sound. My father, Arthur, he didn't say a single word on that message, not a breath, but I just knew he was there, standing beside her as she read those words. I could almost hear his telltale sigh, that soft little exhale he does when he's uncomfortable or wants to avoid conflict, right after Eleanor said attorney. Like a quiet, cowardly full stop at the end of their sentence. Their joint decision. I could have called them back, right then and there. Screamed, cried, demanded an explanation. Begged, maybe, for some sliver of the truth, some reason that made sense. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat there for a long, long moment, the silence in my small living room growing heavier, more suffocating than the thick clouds outside. Then, with a strange kind of calm I didn't recognize in myself, I opened my laptop, pulled up an old, buried email chain. The lawyer I'd met, almost by accident, at that mind-numbing tech expo in Denver 2 years back. Carla Mendez. I didn't pour out my heart in the email. I didn't ask for sympathy or advice. Just a few concise lines. Carla, it's Verity Rhodes. The situation we briefly discussed has materialized. I need to discuss my options regarding my equity. Are you available for a confidential call this week? And I hit send. The first time I set foot in the actual Rhodes manufacturing plant, I was 21. Fresh out of college with a business degree, I wasn't entirely sure what to do with, wearing a charcoal gray suit that was way too stiff and heels that pinched my feet and screamed newbie. I remember one of the old shift supervisors, a kind, weathered man named Mac, chuckling good-naturedly and saying I looked like I'd taken a wrong turn on my way to a bank interview. He wasn't wrong, but I was determined, a little naive, sure, and definitely stubborn enough to learn. My grandfather, Thomas Rhodes, he built the company from a single, second-hand welding torch, a handshake agreement, and a whole lot of grit and vision back in 1965. He was a legend in our family, a titan. He passed away just after I graduated, and the company, well, it was passed down to my parents. Arthur, my father, received 50%. Eleanor, my mother, got 30%. And the remaining 20%? That was unofficially, but very clearly, earmarked for my older brother, Spencer, for whenever he decided to grace the family legacy with his brilliant presence. He never seemed that interested in the nuts and bolts of it, though. Spencer was all about buzzwords, networking, and disrupting established industries. He found actual metal fabrication too analog, he'd once said with a dismissive wave of his hand. Too grimy and real for his grand, ethereal vision. He chased a few fleeting startup dreams down in Austin, failed spectacularly a couple of times. Always someone else's fault, naturally, and eventually, inevitably, drifted back to Oregon. Not to the shop floor, to learn the business, though. Oh no. Spencer landed straight into a newly created office with a fancy, ambiguous title. Director of Strategic Innovation, or something equally vague and unaccountable. And me? I stayed. I learned the business from the ground up, the hard way. Started in purchasing, learning about raw materials and supply chains. Then moved into payroll, understanding the lifeblood of the company, its people. I took night classes in advanced accounting, supply chain management, even corporate law, anything to make myself more valuable, more indispensable. Pretty soon, I was the one they called day or night, when the complex financial models didn't balance, or when a crucial bank loan application needed to be completely overhauled and resubmitted before morning. No one ever really said a formal, "Thank you, Verity, for saving our collective bacon yet again." But the side glances from the senior managers, the doubtful looks from the old-timers who'd known my grandfather, those gradually stopped. My mother, Eleanor, she used to introduce me at company holiday parties or Chamber of Commerce events as our little numbers girl. Like I was still 12 years old, meticulously balancing her checkbook at the kitchen table. Verity keeps us all on the straight and narrow, she'd trill, with that bright, brittle laugh of hers. Honestly, I don't know what we'd do without her. And the funny, painful thing is, I actually believed her. I lived inside that sentence for years. It was my identity, my purpose, my entire world. It felt like security, like a shield. That belief, that shield, it carried me through a lot. Right up until the year, we almost went under. Completely under. 2 major, long-term clients defaulted on massive contracts within weeks of each other. Payroll was due, suppliers were screaming for payment, and the company accounts were terrifyingly empty. I remember the raw, unmasked panic in my father's eyes during a hushed late-night meeting, the way my mother's usually confident smile became tight and fragile at the edges. So, without telling them, without telling a single soul, I did something drastic. I took out a second mortgage on my little house. The little craftsman bungalow I'd scraped and saved for, my one solid piece of the world. I funneled the funds, a significant amount, into the company through a shell LLC I hastily set up, just a bland, anonymous name on a piece of paper, so it wouldn't look like a desperate family bailout, so it wouldn't spook the banks or other creditors. On the quarterly financial reports, I just vaguely labeled it a strategic capital infusion from a private investment entity. Kept it obscure. The next quarter, when things had stabilized and we were miraculously back in the black, I overheard Arthur at a local business awards breakfast, booming to some local dignitary, Spencer, my boy. He really pulled us out of the fire with that new invoicing strategy he implemented. Kid's a natural, a real visionary. Spencer hadn't even logged into the damn accounting software for at least 6 months. I swallowed it. The bitterness, the injustice. Like I always did. I told myself, again, it didn't matter who got the applause, who took the bows, as long as the lights stayed on, as long as people got their paychecks. That was my job, right? The quiet fixer, the unseen guardian, the name they called in a 5-alarm fire, not the one they engraved on the awards. But then, things started to shift. Subtly at first, like the tide going out so slowly you barely notice until the waterline is suddenly much farther away. My invites to the high-level, closed-door strategy meetings? They started drying up, vanishing from my calendar. When I asked, Eleanor would say something vague like, I was already swamped with the operational details and should focus on my core strengths, dear. Then came the newly redesigned organizational chart, unveiled with much fanfare at an all-hands meeting. My name wasn't on it. Anywhere. Not under finance, not under operations, not even as a dotted line. When I finally cornered Eleanor about it, she just gave me that placid, almost pitying smile, patted my arm in that dismissive way she had, and said, Oh, Verity, honey, that's just a visual aid, mainly for the new investors we're courting. You know how much we value you. Don't read too much into it. That was 2 long years before the voicemail. A year after that, I noticed, with a sickening lurch in my stomach, that my photo and bio had vanished from the Our Team page on the company website. There was Arthur, of course, founder and CEO. Eleanor, president. And Spencer, now elevated to chief visionary officer. No CFO. No vice president of finance. No mention of Verity Roads at all. I took a screenshot that day. Not because I thought I'd need it as evidence for a lawsuit, but because a part of me honestly, truly couldn't process it. I was becoming invisible, right before my own eyes, in the very place I'd poured my heart and soul into. The essential, hard-working gear that everyone forgets about, takes for granted, until it finally, inevitably, grinds to a halt. But I stayed. God help me, I stayed. Because deep down, buried under all the hurt and the mounting confusion, a tiny, foolish, hopeful part of me still clung to the belief. Hoped they'd suddenly wake up and see me again. Hoped that all those years of keeping them solvent, of cleaning up their messes, of being the reliable, unwavering one, that it simply had to count for something. That blood, that family still meant belonging. Still meant I wouldn't be cast aside like an old, worn-out tool. It wasn't a sudden explosion, you know? That's the truly cruel, insidious part of it. It wasn't a dramatic firing squad moment. There wasn't even a single heated argument, a confrontation where things were laid bare. It was a slow, methodical subtraction. A quiet, deliberate phasing out. One less crucial email I was CC'd on. One shared project drive I suddenly couldn't access anymore. The password mysteriously changed. A critical client strategy meeting I only heard about through the grapevine, days after it happened. The first real, undeniable jolt, the one that made me feel like the air had been punched from my lungs, was when I tried to update the master vendor schedule, a complex, multi-layered spreadsheet I'd built from scratch years ago, the one that tracked every single supplier relationship, every contract term, every payment due date, the veritable Bible of our payables. Access denied. The screen flashed, stark and red. Just like that. My creation, locked away from me. I figured it was an IT glitch, a system error. I emailed Spencer, keeping my tone light, casual. His reply was breezy, almost offensively dismissive. Oh, yeah, V. We're migrating some of that old finance stuff to a new, more dynamic platform. Don't worry your head about it. It's all being handled by my team now. I asked, politely, to be included in the new workflow, to be given access. Radio silence. A few weeks after that, my security badge, the one I'd used for over a decade, wouldn't open the door to the main conference room on the executive floor. The little light just blinked in angry, accusatory red. Eleanor, when I finally managed to catch her between her very important calls, said the security system was being updated and she'd definitely look into it for me. She never did. One by one, the pieces of the company that had once flowed through my hands, my inbox, my meticulously organized spreadsheets, they were rerouted, diverted, sent down new channels that deliberately bypassed me. It was like being a ghost in my own office. I'd walk past a meeting room and see them all in there. Arthur, Eleanor, Spencer, a few key managers, heads bent together in conspiratorial huddles, and the door would be pointedly, firmly closed. No one would meet my eye if I happened to glance in. Emails about critical projects, about budget allocations, about staffing changes would circulate, and my name would just not be on the distribution list. I'd hear snippets of hushed conversations in the hallway, decisions being made that directly impacted areas I used to exclusively manage, and I was learning about them third-hand, like an unwelcome outsider, a curious bystander. Did I question it? Yes, subtly at first, then a little more directly. Is there anything I need to be looped in on for the Q3 revenue projections? I'd ask Eleanor, trying to keep the anxiety out of my voice. She'd just pat my arm, that infuriating, dismissive little pat, and say, "Don't you worry your pretty little head about that, Verity. Spencer's got a new dynamic system he's implementing. We're streamlining me out, apparently, piece by painstaking piece." The loneliness of it was a quiet, constant ache in my chest. You start to question your own sanity, you know? Am I imagining this? Am I being overly sensitive, paranoid? Did I unknowingly do something terribly wrong? But there was never anything concrete, never a direct conversation, just this creeping, chilling invisibility. Things in the company seemed to move faster on the surface, sure, but underneath, I could see the cracks forming. I'd spot glaring errors in financial reports that crossed my desk by accident, missed deadlines on the production schedule that would have dire consequences, client communication missteps, things I would have caught in a heartbeat, things I used to catch and fix silently. But no one seemed to notice anymore, or if they did, they didn't care enough to ask the slowly fading ghost in the finance department. Then the annual shareholder packet arrived. For the first time in 17 years, it wasn't emailed to me as a primary stakeholder. A thick, glossy, hard copy landed on my desk with a thud, days late. My copy, it was different. Subtly but critically different from the ones I knew the other principals would receive. Key financial schedules, the detailed ones I always scrutinized, were missing. The charts looked simplified, almost insultingly cartoonish, all bright colors and upward arrows that didn't quite match the raw data I still had access to. The usual dry, factual, legally vetted language was replaced with this upbeat, almost manic, buzzword-laden prose. I recognized Spencer's bombastic, visionary voice all over it, his fingerprints on every over-caffeinated phrase. But the thing that really gut-punched me, The detail that made my blood run cold wasn't the manipulated numbers or the glossy, misleading veneer. It was the signature block on the main overview letter. Eleanor Rhodes, President. Arthur Rhodes, CEO. Spencer Rhodes, Chief Visionary Officer. 3 names, not 4. I dug out my original ownership documents from the safe deposit box, the ones from when Grandpa Thomas passed away, my hands trembling slightly. My 40% equity stake was still legally mine, on paper, irrevocable. But in every internal memo I'd managed to glimpse, every new policy draft that accidentally landed in my inbox, every strategic proposal Spencer presented with such unearned confidence, I was gone, vanished, as if I'd never existed. And this time, there was no friendly refrigerator hum or gentle Portland rain to soften the blow of that realization. Just a gaping, silent void where my name, my work, my 17 years of unwavering loyalty used to be. They hadn't fought me. They hadn't confronted me or criticized my performance. They just diluted me, made me irrelevant, optional, an inconvenient footnote until I was effectively nothing at all in the operational reality of the company I had helped build. I actually drafted an email to Eleanor that night, pages long, pouring out 17 years of frustration, of dedication, of feeling unseen. I started with, "You once told me," standing right in Grandpa Thomas's old office, "that I was the backbone of this company. What happened to that, Mother?" But I never sent it, because then I found it, almost by accident. Buried deep in a temporary shared cloud folder I wasn't even supposed to have access to anymore, probably an oversight in their meticulous erasure campaign. A PDF document. The official internal draft of the Rhodes Manufacturing, Strategic Restructuring and Reorganization Plan, confidential. The one that had been circulated to the corporate attorneys for review. My heart hammered against my ribs as I scrolled through the dense, impersonal legal jargon. And there, at the very bottom, beneath all the cold, sterile clauses about operational efficiencies and streamlined management structures, under the typed line "initiated and approved by," was her signature. Eleanor Rhodes, President. And then, typed in parentheses right beside her name, the word that twisted the knife with brutal finality, Mother. The same woman who'd once stroked my hair and held my hand when I cried my eyes out over a blown quarterly sales projection early in my career, terrified I'd let everyone down. The same woman who'd looked me directly in the eye and said, countless times, with what I'd believed was genuine sincerity, "Verity, we simply couldn't do this without you. You're indispensable." She had signed the document that, in no uncertain terms, with chilling clarity, declared, "We no longer need you. You are, in fact, entirely dispensable." I didn't reply. Not to the misleading shareholder packet, not to Spencer's endless stream of smarmy memos about synergy and next-level paradigms, not even to that godawful, soul-crushing voicemail. What was there possibly left to say? "You forgot about me?" No. That wasn't it. They hadn't forgotten. They had deliberately, methodically, meticulously erased me. There's a vast, canyon-like difference between the two. For a few numb days, I just existed, went through the motions. Out of sheer, ingrained habit, a small, stupid, hopeful part of me kept checking my phone, half expecting a follow-up call. And oops, Verity. That voicemail was a terrible mistake, a misunderstanding email. An apology. Anything. Any sign that this was all some horrible corporate nightmare I'd wake up from. Nothing came. Just silence. A deafening, definitive silence from their end. And that's when something inside me shifted. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden explosion of rage or tears. It was more like the quiet, final, definitive click of a heavy old vault door swinging shut. You don't even realize how much noise the old draft from under the door was making, how much of your energy it was sapping until it's gone. And then there's just a different kind of quiet. A quiet that is clear. A quiet that lets you think without the background roar of their expectations and manipulations. I opened that old email thread, the one from that awful, soul-crushingly boring tech expo in Denver. The sterile hotel convention center, the endless PowerPoint presentations filled with jargon, but I'd met Carla Mendez there. A sharp, incisive, no-nonsense lawyer from a boutique corporate law firm in Seattle that specialized in exactly this kind of messy situation, complex ownership disputes and strategic exits in privately held, family-run companies. We'd exchanged cards, a polite professional formality. I'd almost thrown hers away a dozen times over the past 2 years, thinking I'd never need it. But for some reason, I hadn't. I typed a new message. Short, terse, to the point. No emotion, no long, rambling backstory. Carla, Verity Rhodes here. I'm ready to explore all available options concerning my 40% equity stake in Rhodes Manufacturing. There have been significant internal changes impacting my role and involvement. Please let me know when you're free for a confidential discussion at your earliest convenience. Her reply landed in my inbox less than an hour later. Just 2 words that changed everything. Understood, Verity. My assistant will reach out to schedule. We'll begin with quiet diligence. No flags raised on their end until we are fully prepared. Quiet diligence. That phrase, it resonated deep in my bones. It felt like the first breath of clean, cool air after being trapped in a stuffy, suffocating room for far too long. While they were busy restructuring me out with their clumsy, cruel tactics, I was going to quietly, diligently, and strategically restructure my own exit. Not for revenge, not initially. Not even at that particular point for some grand notion of justice. Just out. But it would be on my terms. My timeline. Not theirs. So, I started digging. Not for dirt on them, not at first. Just for facts. My facts. The truth of my 17 years. Old emails I'd meticulously archived. Financial transfer confirmations I'd saved. Complete backups of the original QuickBooks company files before Spencer's visionary accounting practices started muddying the clear waters of our financial reality. Those personal loans I discreetly funneled into the company coffers during lean times, the ones that saved their skins more than once, the ones they never formally acknowledged or thanked me for. I had the bank statements, the wire confirmations, the LLC formation documents, everything. All the significant contributions they'd conveniently forgotten to list in their glowing, self-congratulatory annual reports. My digital folders, and soon my dining room table, were a testament to years of silent, uncredited work. Complex spreadsheets tracking substantial cost savings I'd implemented. PDFs of multi-million-dollar contracts I'd personally negotiated, securing our future. A meticulous, undeniable paper trail they probably assumed I'd either lost in the shuffle of years or wouldn't have the energy or foresight to assemble. They always underestimated my thoroughness. They underestimated me. I printed everything. Every last relevant scrap of paper. Organized it chronologically, by project, by crisis averted. Color-coded it by fiscal year. It took me almost a solid week of late nights, fueled by coffee and a growing sense of cold resolve. Just me, my trusty desk lamp casting long, dancing shadows in my little apartment, and the steady, rhythmic patter of the Portland rain as my unlikely soundtrack. Each document I unearthed, each old email chain where I'd advised caution or flagged a potential issue they'd blithely ignored, each financial report I'd painstakingly corrected in the dead of night. It wasn't just paper. It was a piece of my stolen narrative, my professional integrity. With every click of the printer, with every precisely placed label I affixed to a folder, I felt like I was methodically, patiently reassembling myself, my history. They had tried to reduce 17 years of my life, my intellect, my dedication, my sheer sweat and tears, into a dismissive footnote, an inconvenient afterthought. But this steadily growing mountain of evidence taking over my dining room table, it was undeniable. It was the irrefutable truth, in black and white and meticulously organized color-coded tabs. I didn't feel anger as I worked, not that hot, consuming, explosive kind. It was something colder, much more focused. A kind of righteous precision. Like an archaeologist, patiently, carefully brushing away layers of accumulated dirt and debris to reveal something precious, something valuable, that had been deliberately buried and forgotten. I was excavating my own professional life, proving to myself, more than to anyone else at that stage, that I had mattered, that I had been essential, that my contributions were real and significant. Carla and her team, they were incredible, quietly efficient, razor sharp. They went through every document I provided with a forensic fine-tooth comb. We had secure conference calls, never from my old office, always discreetly from my home or a neutral location. We talked strategy, potential buyer profiles, how to execute this sale cleanly, quietly, and with absolute legal impermeability. I didn't breathe a single word of this to anyone. Not my closest friends, not even my part-time virtual assistant who still occasionally, innocently, forwarded me stray office memos from Rhodes Manufacturing. They had taken 17 years of my unwavering presence and dedication and condensed it into a single, brutal 30-second voicemail. I would take their calculated silence, their attempted erasure, and I would make it count. I would make it expensive. We didn't meet in some high-rise, glass and steel corporate boardroom. No power lunches at stuffy, overpriced restaurants. Carla, with her typical discretion, arranged our first meeting with a potential buyer at a quiet, out-of-the-way cafe in a newly renovated part of the old industrial district. The kind of place with exposed brick, reclaimed wood tables, and artisanal coffee, where no one would look twice at three people having a serious but low-key conversation. No flashy briefcases on the table, no company logos, no slick PowerPoint presentations. Just three people, a pot of strong black tea, and the weight of unspoken truths. The man across from me, the potential buyer for my substantial minority stake, introduced himself simply as Marcus Thorne. He was understated, mid-50s, perhaps, with a calm, almost gentle demeanor that belied the sharpness in his eyes. He wore a simple gray cashmere sweater, and his voice was level, unhurried. No aggressive sales pitch, no empty charm. His firm, he explained quietly, specialized in acquiring significant minority stakes in established, often family-run, mid-sized businesses. Especially, he added with a slight, almost imperceptible, knowing smile, ones that were showing clear signs of transitional friction. That's what he called it, with academic detachment. Transitional friction. I privately called it being systematically, emotionally, and professionally gutted by my own damn family. Carla had vetted him and his firm thoroughly, of course. The connection was discreet, meticulously researched, and entirely above board. Marcus didn't ask me to air our family's dirty laundry in public or to explicitly badmouth my parents or Spencer. He didn't need to. The comprehensive binder I'd prepared, meticulously tabbed, cross-referenced, filled with cold, hard, verifiable data, that spoke for me, volumes more eloquently than any emotional outburst could have. The unacknowledged multi-six-figure cash infusions I'd made. The perils I'd covered from my own personal savings during cash flow crises. The overlapping loan guarantees I'd personally backed with my own private assets when the company's credit rating was in the toilet. He just nodded slowly, thoughtfully, as he turned the pages, his expression largely unreadable, though I caught a flicker of something, respect, surprise, in his eyes a few times. He paused for a long time at the detailed comparison spreadsheets, the ones showing the original, accurate financial data for my tenure versus the increasingly creative and opaque accounting that had started appearing in the company's internal reports after I was effectively sidelined and Spencer took over financial oversight. "You're the firewall," he said at last, his voice quiet but firm. It wasn't a question. It was a clear, concise statement of fact. They relied on you for years to absorb the shocks, to quietly fix the unfixable, to maintain stability, until they either convinced themselves they didn't need you anymore or perhaps, he added, his intelligent eyes meeting mine directly across the small table, until they decided they wanted all the credit for success without the burden of actual competence or accountability. I didn't say anything. I just watched the steam curl lazily from my teacup, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the tea. For the first time in a very, very long time, I felt seen. Truly seen. Not as Eleanor's numbers girl, not as Spencer's quiet little sister who's good with spreadsheets, not as the family problem solver, but as a strategic asset they had profoundly, catastrophically misjudged and undervalued. Over the next intensive week, Marcus Thorne's firm conducted their own independent, deep-dive due diligence. It was swift. It was silent. It was incredibly thorough. They requested access to years of board minutes, historical partnership agreements, complex equipment lease schedules, much of which was already technically public record, or fully accessible to them once they had my formal, notarized letter of intent to explore a sale of my 40% equity stake. What they unearthed, even beyond what I had provided, it wasn't just sloppy. It was deliberately, almost artistically, obscured. A significant line item on recent budgets, innocuously labeled something like Strategic Market Development Initiative, Southwest Region, turned out to be a disastrous, money-hemorrhaging, ill-conceived expansion into the Texas market, a vanity pet project Spencer had passionately championed and Eleanor had enthusiastically, blindly approved, directly against my well-documented, data-backed advice from 2 years prior. Over $800,000 in undeclared losses, buried deep within convoluted intercompany budget reports and astonishingly vague future revenue projections. Another intricate audit trail flagged a series of highly questionable, often duplicated, six-figure payments to a newly formed marketing consultancy firm that had no discernible online presence, no verifiable physical address, and no actual deliverables to show for the substantial fees. A shell company, most likely. A sophisticated way to siphon funds, or a hidden kickback scheme to one of Spencer's cronies. Or worse. I didn't press Carla or Marcus for the salacious details. I didn't need the drama, the sordid specifics. I just needed the undeniable, documented truth to have its own weight, its own quiet, devastating power. Within 2 incredibly fast-paced weeks, the deal was done. The purchase and sale agreement for my entire 40% equity stake in Rhodes Manufacturing was finalized, signed, sealed, and delivered. Valued by a highly respected, independent, third-party business assessor, fairly, I might add, based on the actual underlying assets and realistic future earning potential of the company, not the creatively doctored books my family had been preparing. My shares were transferred in full to Marcus Thorne's private holding company. There were no dramatic boardroom showdowns, no tearful, pleading family confrontations, no last-minute interventions. The company's original operating agreement, which, in a stunning oversight on their part, hadn't been properly updated since 2016, a critical detail I had noted years ago, a crucial legal leverage point on my side now, had no restrictive right of first refusal clause for existing shareholders in the event of a private sale. I had every legal, ethical, and moral right to sell my shares to whomever I chose, whenever I chose. We signed the final papers in a small, anonymous, neutral site meeting room at a shared executive workspace downtown. Neutral territory, indeed. The table was blonde maple, utilitarian, functional. No imposing family portraits glaring down from the walls, no framed, hypocritical motivational quotes about legacy or family values. Just the quiet, decisive scratch of expensive pens on thick, official paper. My signature, then Marcus Thorne's. It felt surreal, yet profoundly grounding. This wasn't just a financial transaction, a simple exchange of shares for money. It was the definitive, irrevocable severing of a thick, tangled cord that had bound me, sometimes supported me, but mostly restrained me for nearly 2 incredibly long decades. A cord I once naively believed was a lifeline, my security, but had long since, insidiously, become a suffocating restraint. There was a pang of something, I won't lie. A brief, sharp flicker of sadness for the idealistic, hopeful young woman I'd once been, the one who believed so fiercely and naively in the sanctity of family loyalty and the enduring power of a shared legacy. For my grandfather's original, honest vision, now so cynically twisted and tarnished by his own children. But overwhelming that fleeting, momentary sorrow was a profound, almost breathtaking sense of release. Liberation. Like a massive, invisible weight I hadn't even fully realized I was constantly carrying had just been gently, but decisively, lifted from my shoulders, from my soul. My hand didn't even tremble as I signed my name, Verity Rhodes, for the last time in connection with that company. It was steady,
Calm.
resolute. This wasn't an act of anger or revenge, not in that moment. It was an act of profound self-preservation, of quiet, dignified reclamation. After the substantial funds cleared my personal bank account, a sum that literally made my breath catch in my throat, not just for the unexpected size of it, but for what it truly represented, my freedom, my future, a future entirely unwritten and unconstrained by them, Carla drafted a very brief, very formal, and utterly impersonal exit notification. I glanced at it once, nodded my approval. Then, before Carla sent it, I opened that original, cold voicemail from Eleanor on my phone. Listened to it one last, final time. Our attorney will be in contact. They had intended it as a threat, a final, dismissive shove into oblivion. Funny, isn't it, how it ended up being the key that unlocked an unexpected open door for me? I archived the voicemail file. Then, with a steady hand, I composed a new email, addressed to Arthur, Eleanor, and Spencer. Subject: formal notification of equity transfer. Body: this email serves as formal confirmation of the complete and irrevocable transfer of my entire 40% equity stake in Rhodes Manufacturing, effective as of today's date. All future communications regarding company matters or my previous involvement should be directed exclusively through my legal counsel, Ms. Carla Mendez, at the contact information provided below. No, sincerely, no, warmly, no regards. Just closure. And then, for the very first time in 17 long years, I dragged the entire Rhodes Manufacturing folder from the desktop of my laptop to the trash can icon, and I didn't hesitate for a single second when the system dialog box popped up. Are you sure you want to permanently delete these items?
Delete. Yes.
Absolutely. The day after the sale was official, the day after I sent that final, curt, and liberating email, the silence was different. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive, ignoring silence I had grown so accustomed to from them. It was the expansive, charged, almost expectant silence of a held breath, the quiet before a storm you know is inevitable. I half expected the phone to ring off the hook immediately, for the barrage to begin. Part of me, the part that had been conditioned to their family drama and emotional manipulations for so long, was unconsciously braced for an explosion, for accusations and hysterics. But for most of that first day, it was quiet. Eerily, unsettlingly quiet. I made coffee. I actually read a book, a novel, for pleasure. The Portland rain pattered gently, rhythmically, against my apartment windows. It felt normal, almost too normal. And in that very normality, that unexpected peace, there was a strange, unfamiliar kind of power. I wasn't anxiously waiting for their call, not really. I was simply existing, breathing, on my own terms, in my own space. The storm would come. I knew it would. They wouldn't let this go unanswered. But for those first few precious hours, that first full day of freedom, there was just the profound peace of a difficult decision finally made, a necessary action irrevocably taken. The quiet, clean peace of the immediate aftermath, before the inevitable aftershocks truly began to register on their personal Richter scale. The first call came at precisely 6:12 the next morning. My father, Arthur. His name flashed on my caller ID. I looked at it, took a calm sip of my tea, and let it go to voicemail. The second call, Eleanor, my mother, came just 2 minutes later, as expected. I silenced the ringer. By the time I'd made and actually finished a second hot cup of coffee, slowly, mindfully, savoring every sip in the quiet morning light, there were 16 missed calls logged on my phone. By lunchtime, it was closer to 50. The next morning, it had escalated to over 70.
Spencer.
My brother, Spencer, was relentless. He tried my cell again and again. He tried my old office extension at Rhodes, which I assumed, with a grim little smile, was now just ringing into the void or to a very confused temp. He even, somehow, managed to get Carla's direct private line. She, of course, with her customary professional froideur, informed him that all communication must be in writing through official channels and then promptly blocked his number. He left a string of increasingly frantic, bordering in hysterical voicemails on my phone, each one less coherent, more laced with raw panic than the last. On the third day of this relentless siege, I picked up one of his calls. Not because I felt any lingering obligation or a shred of pity, but because I was genuinely curious. I wanted to hear, with my own ears, what pure, unadulterated, cornered animal panic sounded like in his voice. The voice that had so confidently, so arrogantly, taken credit for my hard work and my ideas for so many years. Verity, Verity, thank God. You have to stop this. You have to undo it. Please, Verity, you don't understand what's happening here. It's a disaster. He was breathless, almost sobbing, sounded like he was pacing frantically. The sharp, distinct clatter of his expensive Italian leather shoes on what I imagined was the cold marble floor of the Rhodes manufacturing office lobby. They've frozen everything, he practically shrieked into the phone. The new investors, your damn buyers, they're demanding a full forensic audit. They're saying there are irregularities, discrepancies. Verity, they're going through every single line item, every damn transaction, for the last 5 years. I let the silence stretch, just for a beat, savoring his unraveling. Then, calmly, my voice even and cool, I said, "Well, Spencer, from where I'm sitting, that just sounds like extremely thorough and appropriate due diligence to me." He made this choked, gurgling sound, halfway between a hysterical, terrified laugh and a desperate sob. "You don't get it, do you? They're going back years. They've already flagged the entire Texas expansion project disaster, the unexplained vendor overpayments, even mom's private restructuring memos. They're finding gaps, Verity. Huge, gaping holes. Things that could look really, really bad for us. Or things that are really, really bad, Spencer? I asked, my voice still quiet, almost gentle, letting the implication hang heavy in the air between us. He didn't answer that directly. Just a shaky, ragged inhale. You have to help us, Verity, he finally whispered, his voice stripped of all its usual bluster, all its arrogance. You're the only one who understands this stuff.
You have to talk to them.
They'll listen to you. Just tell them it's all a big misunderstanding. Tell them we're clean.
Please.
I leaned back in my comfortable chair, looking out at the calm, gray, indifferent Portland sky. I can't do that, Spencer, I said softly. Why not? For God's sake, Verity, why not? He wailed, his voice cracking with desperation. Because, I said, letting each word land precisely, softly, like a carefully placed stone. You and Mom and Dad, you all made it abundantly, crystal clear. I'm out, remember? He went utterly, completely silent then. The only sound was his ragged breathing. I was told, I continued, my voice unwavering, almost conversational, that I'd be hearing from your attorney. Instead, it seems my buyer has now heard from theirs. And now, your company, our former company, has a very powerful new stakeholder. One with a lot of very serious, very pointed questions. Questions that, thankfully, I no longer have any professional or personal obligation to answer. Verity, his voice cracked then, lost all its remaining bluster, all its entitled indignation. It wasn't supposed to go like this. Mom didn't think you'd actually, he trailed off. Actually what, Spencer? I prompted gently, genuinely curious to hear the rest of his pathetic sentence. He hesitated, then the truth, ugly and raw and self-serving, finally tumbled out a mumbled confession. Actually, a leave. Not for real. Not sell your shares.
Especially not to them.
To outsiders. I waited, letting his words hang in the air. You were supposed to fight for your job, he mumbled then, his voice so low I almost didn't hear him. You were supposed to make a scene.
Demand to stay.
And that one admission, that pathetic revelation, it made me pause. Because for a fleeting, unexpected second, he sounded almost lost. Defeated. Almost like the insecure younger kid brother I used to sneak cookies with from the jar in the dusty old break room at the plant, long ago, before we grew into these strange, bitter caricatures and a toxic family drama we never consciously auditioned for. You wanted me to fight, I said, the ugly realization dawning, cold and clear and sharp as ice. You wanted me to kick and scream and demand my place back, so you could all be the magnanimous, forgiving ones when I inevitably failed. So you could graciously allow me to stay, but on a much tighter leash, forever grateful, forever diminished.
He didn't deny it.
He couldn't. And there it was. The whole ugly, unspoken, manipulative script. Their pathetic little game. They'd push me out, marginalize me, erase me. And if I reacted with predictable emotion, with anger, with pleas, with desperation, they'd retain all the power, all the control, paint me as unstable. And if I just stayed quiet, if I just took it, absorbed the blows, they assumed, in their arrogance, that I'd eventually come crawling back, tail between my legs, broken and defeated, grateful for any scraps of attention or responsibility they deigned to throw my way. But I hadn't played either of their expected roles. I'd simply, quietly, found the unmarked emergency exit, calmly unlocked it, and walked straight through, closing it very firmly and locking it behind me. "You could still fix this, Verity." He tried, one last, desperate, Hail Mary plea. Just one call. To Marcus Thorne. For us. For the family. "No, Spencer," I said, my voice soft now, but utterly absolute, devoid of any remaining anger, just a profound weariness. "You fix it. You're the director of strategic innovation, remember? You're the one who always said I wasn't involved in the real big-picture decisions. Well, now you are. This, my dear brother, is as real and as big-picture as it gets." And I ended the call. He tried calling back immediately, of course. Several times. I didn't answer. Carla called me about 10 minutes later. A professional courtesy. An update. Marcus Thorne's forensic audit team had officially escalated their initial findings into a full-blown, formal compliance investigation. My former title, Chief Financial Officer, a title they never officially bestowed upon me on paper but had certainly, conveniently, implied on countless bank documents, loan applications, and investor pitches over the years, was apparently flagged in numerous historical SEC filings and financial disclosures, yet was conspicuously, tellingly, absent from all recent corporate documentation. The potential legal and financial exposure for Rhodes Manufacturing, she said in her calm, measured lawyerly tone, was significant. Potentially catastrophic. In short, they were in very, very deep trouble. And as I listened to Carla, I felt nothing. No surge of vindictive joy. No lingering, bitter anger. Just a profound, almost ethereal stillness. Like I'd been standing unknowingly in the deafening, chaotic eye of a hurricane for 17 relentless years without even realizing how deafening the surrounding roar truly was, until suddenly, I'd stepped out into the clear, calm air beyond its reach. And all I could hear, finally, was the quiet, steady sound of my own breathing. A few days after that illuminating call with Spencer, an email from Eleanor, my mother, appeared in my personal inbox. Not an apology, not even close, not an explanation. Just one terse, almost demanding line. "Verity, can we please meet? As soon as possible. Privately. No lawyers present." I didn't reply. I didn't even feel a flicker of temptation to engage. I simply printed the email, slipped it into a plain manila folder, and handwrote on the tab in black ink, "Post-sale communication, E. Rhodes, unanswered." Then I filed it away in a box with all the other relics of that former life. And just like that, the inevitable collapse of their carefully constructed, self-serving world wasn't some dramatic, fiery, explosive spectacle for all to see. It was quiet, insidious, like watching a condemned, derelict building slowly, inexorably implode in on itself in ultra-slow motion, a silent plume of dust rising after the last, critical, load-bearing support beam has been silently, expertly, and surgically removed. I didn't block their phone numbers or email addresses. I didn't need to. Spencer stopped calling altogether after word of the official forensic audit, and the ensuing compliance investigation started circulating like wildfire through the tight-knit local business journals and networking circles. Small town, big gossip. Reputations, once tarnished, are hard to polish. Eleanor, predictably, switched to sending one carefully worded, vaguely professional, and utterly hollow email a week. Always ending with a jarringly inappropriate, "Warmly, Mom." Arthur, my father, Arthur, never reached out again. Not once. Not a call, not an email, not even a carrier pigeon. Complete and utter silence. I set up an automatic email rule. Anything from their known addresses, or containing certain keywords related to Rhodes Manufacturing, went directly into a separate, unread folder. Once a week, Carla's calm, efficient paralegal would securely log in, quickly review them for anything remotely legally pertinent, there never was, and then send curt, templated, non-committal, attorney-approved replies. I never saw the actual contents of their desperate, pleading, or subtly threatening messages.
It was just cleaner that way. Better for my peace of mind.
Some small, fearful, conditioned part of me had braced for the silence that followed to feel like grief, like a gaping, raw wound. I think I unconsciously expected a secondary storm, a painful aftershock of profound loss and crushing loneliness. But it never came. Instead, what slowly, tentatively, began to bloom in that newly quiet, uncluttered space in my life was room. Room to breathe. Room to think. Room to just be. I hadn't realized, until it was gone, how utterly constricted my life had become, how tightly wound I'd been for so many years, constantly anticipating the next crisis, the next demand, the next betrayal. I stopped waking up in the middle of the night with my jaw aching from unconsciously clenching it in my sleep. I stopped compulsively checking my phone every 5 minutes for the next urgent email, the next passive-aggressive text, the next fire I'd be expected to put out. I started having actual weekends again. Weekends where I read books, went for long walks by the river, met friends for brunch, and didn't once think about balance sheets or cash flow projections. Coffee that I drank while it was still hot, sitting by my window, watching the world go by. Sunlight slanting through my apartment windows that didn't feel like stolen, guilty moments, like time I should be spending chained to my desk, propping up them. For the very first time in nearly 2 decades, my calendar, my time, my life was entirely my own. Not crammed with emergency board meeting prep, not consumed by late-night damage control for someone else's colossal blunder, not dedicated to silently, thanklessly fixing yet another entirely avoidable mess while being condescendingly told I was so lucky to be part of the core team. Just stillness. A blessed, healing stillness. And in that profound, transformative stillness, something I'd never quite been able to grasp before, something vital, finally crystallized in my mind. It landed with the gentle, undeniable thud of a fundamental truth. They didn't push me out because I was incompetent or difficult or a financial liability. It was, in fact, the complete and utter opposite. They pushed me out because I was competent, because I was strong, because I quietly, consistently, and without fanfare made things work, often in spite of their interference or ineptitude. I was the one who truly understood the intricate, complex machinery of the business, the one who could see the potential problems looming on the horizon long before they exploded, the one who knew where all the financial skeletons were buried, because I was usually the one who had to perform the quiet, discreet burials to protect the company's reputation, their reputations, their legacy. I had become the steady, reliable, indispensable engine in a car they wanted to pretend they were expertly, effortlessly driving. And because they couldn't fully control me, couldn't effectively micromanage what they didn't truly understand on a granular level, and certainly couldn't take direct, unassailable credit for my more complex strategic successes without inadvertently exposing their own glaring inadequacies, they chose to try and dismantle the engine. They chose to attempt to erase the very part that, ironically, kept them running as smoothly and successfully as they had for so long. It was never really about my performance. It was always fundamentally about their insecurity, their deep-seated fear, their desperate, pathological need for absolute, unquestioned control, even if it meant crippling the very thing they claimed to cherish above all else. So, yes, they tried to erase me. But here's the beautiful, empowering thing about being erased, about being made invisible by those who fear your light. It doesn't actually make you disappear. It just frees you from their constricting narrative. It makes you infinitely harder for them to manipulate, to control, to diminish ever again. The package arrived on a typically rainy Portland Thursday afternoon, about 6 months after the sale. A plain brown padded envelope, no return address, but my name and address were printed on the label in Eleanor's distinctive, elegant, and instantly recognizable handwriting. My stomach gave a little, involuntary lurch, just for a second, a ghost of old anxieties. Inside, nestled carefully in protective bubble wrap, was a tarnished silver picture frame, the exact one that used to sit, pride of place, on the antique mahogany credenza in the main reception area of the Rhodes manufacturing office. The one right by the leather-bound guest sign-in book, the one everyone saw, family and visitors alike, when they first walked in. In the old, faded photograph, it was the four of us, me, a much younger, more naive Spencer, a robust Arthur, and a smiling Eleanor, standing proudly in front of the original factory building years and years ago, squinting a bit in the bright summer sun. A carefully curated picture of supposed family unity, of a shared, unbreakable legacy. Back then, when that photo was first taken, I'd believed in that idyllic image, wholeheartedly, without reservation. But now, looking at it through wiser, sadder, and much clearer eyes, I saw what I hadn't noticed before. Or perhaps, what simply hadn't been there before. The ornate silver frame itself had a new, small, but noticeable chip in one of the intricately carved corners. And snaking across the protective glass, running right over my younger, smiling, hopeful face, was a faint, but undeniable, hairline crack. Not a deliberate, angry shatter. Not an act of overt, theatrical malice. Just damage, neglect, wear and tear. As if time itself, or perhaps the sheer, unacknowledged weight of their collective denial and betrayal, had slowly, inexorably begun to rub me out, to fracture my image within their narrative. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't attempt to tape the crack or polish the tarnish. I didn't hang it on my wall as some sort of ironic, bitter trophy. I didn't even set it on my desk as a reminder of battles fought and won. I just looked at it for a long, quiet moment. Then, I opened the bottom drawer of my sturdy oak desk, the one where I keep miscellaneous things I don't quite know what else to do with, and I gently placed the frame inside, face down. I closed the drawer, silently, and with that small, quiet, almost reverent action, I felt like I was closing the very last, lingering, slightly ajar door to that chapter of my life. No rage, no bitterness, no lingering, desperate need for some grand, dramatic scene of closure or a tearful admission of their wrongs. They had delivered their cold, hard verdict all those months ago with that brutal voicemail. You're out. And I, in my own way, with my own series of quiet, deliberate, and strategic actions, had simply, finally replied, understood. And that, I realized, was more than enough. Sometimes, the most powerful statement isn't a shout from the rooftops or a fiery confrontation. It's the quiet, decisive turning of a page, the deliberate, conscious choice not to engage in their chaos, their drama, their narrative anymore. The truth, I've learned, has a funny, stubborn way of surfacing, even if it takes years, even if it's deeply inconvenient or painful for those who tried so desperately to bury it under layers of denial and deceit. And sometimes, the clearest, most honest picture of a family or any significant relationship that's run its painful course isn't the one they proudly display on the mantelpiece for all the world to see. It's the broken, faded, cracked one they try to send back to you, hoping you'll take on the burden of their regret, because they can no longer bear to look at the distorted reflection of what they truly lost, or, more accurately, what they willingly, foolishly, threw away. My healing wasn't about them finally understanding the depth of what they did, or offering an apology they weren't capable of. It was about me, finally, unequivocally, understanding my own intrinsic worth, completely separate from their validation, entirely outside of that old, tarnished, cracked picture frame. It was about finding a profound, unshakable peace in the quiet and a resilient, unexpected strength in owning and telling my own story in my own voice. If this story hit close to home for you, if you've ever felt unseen, undervalued, or quietly erased by people you trusted, I'd genuinely love to hear your experience. If you feel comfortable sharing, please feel free to share a thought or a piece of your own story in the comments below. I do read every single one. If you found a little bit of strength, or perhaps a moment of resonance here today, consider subscribing to TK Revenge Story for more stories like this one. And if you feel moved to support the channel and the storytelling through super thanks, please know that your generosity is deeply appreciated. Sometimes, giving, connecting, and sharing our truths are vital parts of our own healing journey too. Thank you for listening.